everyone, welcome to Nanu Conversations. We are here today with Professor Stefan Krumacher from Queen Mary University, and we're going to talk about leadership and artificial intelligence.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Jorge. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. So let's get started.
So Jorge, tell me about your story. So you uniquely blend science, technology, and corporate training. So what inspired you to work at these intersections?
Sure, Stefan. So everything started when I created my first startup back in the year 2000. I designed a learning management system, which we sold to corporations. Then another startup, which I founded, we developed online leadership courses. We gave consultancy in creating corporate universities. And so I spent 10 years in the learning and development area. Then I took 5 years to do research on conversational AI tutoring systems. And I finished a PhD last year, and I started Nanu. That's how I blended corporate training with the scientific research.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you very much. So you just mentioned AI, and AI is a significant change. So can you explain how AI is actually revolutionizing corporate learning and development and leadership development?
Sure, of course, Stefan. There are at least 3 different examples in which AI is changing the landscape of learning and development. First of all, we have recommender systems. For example, if you go to LinkedIn, you can see how LinkedIn, according to your profile, according to your interactions that you have, according to your studies and experience, LinkedIn suggests you e-learning courses to develop more skills related to your profile. So that's one area, recommender systems. The other area is in the field of generative AI. Generative AI is helping instructional designers to create learning objectives for their online courses or just traditional in-person courses. And generative AI is also being used to create even content. So learning and development managers are being more effective because they can develop more courses and content, either in the corporate world or in the educational sector. The third example of how AI is changing learning and development landscape is what exactly Nanu is doing, which is giving real-time feedback on your behaviors in online meetings so that you can do changes on the fly and exhibit leadership skills.
That's really, really interesting. Tell us more about this. So do I understand this correctly, that the app you're working on is helping to create a more inclusive and diverse learning and working environment?
What the Nanu app does, it listens to you during the meetings, and it gives you real-time feedback and after-meeting feedback, so you can become a better active listener.
Okay.
So you can develop collaboration skills, teamwork skills, and you can be able to foster creativity in your team. Now, going back to your question about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the more you allow other people to participate, the more other voices are heard during the meetings, and you start to proactively changing things as a leader and saying, look, I want everyone to have the same time and the same space during the meeting.
It's interesting because somebody has said diversity is a fact, inclusivity is an act. So you're showing us how the Nano app can help to be more inclusive. At the same time, you can monitor, you can self-monitor, you can self-reflect, and to develop your own leadership skills.
Of course, and you move from only reporting on the amount of courses and workshops you give on diversity, equity, and inclusion to a data-driven approach in which you can show results to the board and say, look, before the implementation of this technology, there were 20% of the people participating in meetings. Now we have 80 or 90% of the people participating in meetings, and we have the data to support that. So we're becoming more inclusive.
So that's a game changer then.
That's a game changer because before AI and before the technologies we have now, this was practically impossible. Imagine an AI model that has been trained in scientific research about behavioral sciences. So we trained that model and the model is in real time in everyday meetings everywhere in the company, whether it's a 10,000 employee company or 80,000 employee company, the AI is totally scalable and is measuring how inclusive your company is.
It's like a personal coach and a personal friend.
It's like a personal coach that gives you personalized feedback only to you, because the Nano app is human-centered.
Jorge, have you used the app yourself?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, so how has your leadership changed since you used the app?
I used to interrupt 10, 12 times in a meeting with my teams. And now I'm interrupting only 2 or 3, right? So I'm still in the journey, but that's how I experienced the difference after using the Nano app.
And I had the pleasure to kind of get a demo from you to test it myself, and exactly the same. Yeah. If you're an energized leader, if you really want to get your message across, very often you're impatient. Yeah.
Yes.
And you're not listening enough. And listening is such a core skill, active listening, because otherwise you're only kind of recycling your own knowledge back and forth if you're not listening to the ideas, in particular in an innovative industry, of those who you're working with. Yeah?
Especially if we talk about CEOs or CXOs, right? It's about fast decision. It's about moving fast, right? So they have this drive, as you say, to just give directions and give directives. So that what it's doing is inhibiting the rest of the team, which, by the way, is a team that it's an expensive team, right? And you're not allowing them to participate and to be creative and to help you with pushing the company forward.
And if you ask the C-suite what they need, you would probably hear, we need more leadership in our company, in our organization. And this app is then helping to provide the capability in the company to share more leadership and bring more into leadership responsibility.
Exactly. And not only that, if we talk about cultural values, if we talk about these traits and attributes that make corporates succeed and be leaders, these are the things that needs to be lived every day, and not only to be reported in surveys or questionnaires. You get this pulse service that tells you, yes, the opinion of the people is that we are diverse or that we are inclusive, right? That's just an opinion in a survey. If you move from there to actually measuring what is happening, it's a totally different story.
You make it tangible.
You make it tangible.
You make it personal.
And you make it personal, and you have a method, a system that it's building your culture and maintaining your culture in a way that it's automatic and scalable.
So, Jorge, I've heard that Nanu's got a set of values, company values. Tell us something about the values and why you've chosen them.
Sure. So at Nanu, we have 5 values. So it's persistence, passion, creativity, curiosity, and work-life balance. I'm a firm believer that with persistence, you can achieve anything. Passion is essential because it gives you energy and it gives you this emotional drive that it has no explanation. You just feel it. It's like fire. Curiosity, because we all have a desire to learn. And since the very early beginnings of my career, desire to learn and learning has taken me to my next levels, right? And that is precisely ingrained in the Nano app, right? That's how I connect that to the Nano app, because I love to keep learning, and the fact that you have live, real-time feedback to become better and learn more about leadership skills and cultural values, it's totally connected with my values as a person and the values that Nanu had. And going back to the rest of the values, creativity, right? The other C. Creativity is like an engine. It's an engine of that produces infinite ideas and infinite outcomes. And finally, work-life balance. And I'll share a personal story here. So I remember once in which in my startups, the first one, I had a panic attack, right?
Jeez.
So it could go very easily. You can become so much stressed that you have this type of panic attacks. So that's when I realized, look, if you want to go for a marathon, if you're here for the long term, you think long term, it's not about doing more in less time. It's about having a balance and giving you time for meditation, for sports, for family, for friends, entertainment. And that gives the energy.
Do you, and this is, you mentioned the long-term perspective.
Yes.
What we've also seen in research, and it comes from sports in particular,
Yes.
those training for a marathon, they envisage the moment they're crossing the finishing line. Let's take Nanu. So just imagine Nanu is the household leadership development app.
Yes.
Known globally
Yes.
for what it can kind of bring to leadership development, all the benefits. Yeah. Have you ever envisaged that kind of situation where how would you feel?
Since I conceived Nanu, I was always motivated about the prospect of using AI for the good of society,
Yeah.
for making people better, to be connected with this meaning. So going back to your question on visualizing myself, my mission would be fulfilled when I am telling my story about how Nanu is changing the corporate world.
When you founded Nanu, so what kind of challenges did you see? Also maybe some personal challenges along the way from where you started and where you're now.
Sure. Well, when you are at the forefront of innovation, when you are pushing the limits of what is possible, and when you are using the latest advancements in technology, and when you're training AIs with scientific research, when you're putting that into the market, which is very novel, it takes time. So companies needs to absorb, understand. So you need to find innovators. You need to find people that actually want to test the cutting edge in technology. And that's been a challenge because it's less frequent to find innovators than followers of technology.
So Jorge, an effective entrepreneur is a good storyteller?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
So is it telling a business story and a personal story? Are you bringing your personal story to life as well? Are you telling investors, your team, something about what drives you? What is your underlying energy? Where's it coming from?
Definitely. I think of myself as a very humanistic person. So I'm convinced that humans and persons and people are the most valuable thing here on Earth. And not only that, I'm convinced that when you have happy people, when there's well-being in teams, and they are more creative, they are happier, and even more important, they stay with you. They don't leave to other companies.
You're keeping talent, yeah,
You are
absolutely.
keeping talent with you, which is one of the biggest challenges in corporates nowadays, employee turnover. So it makes human sense and it makes business sense.
I've heard that you are a triathlon as well. Can you tell us something about your sports and how the sports is giving you the drive and the power
Yes,
to do your business?
definitely. So, well, I used to compete at a World Triathlon Championships years ago, and I'm trying to go back to that cadence. But yes, now that I've been taking the training, I feel so. I wake up in the morning, I do my meditation, and then I head either to run or to cycle or to swim. And you get this boost of energy that you apply every day, right? I heard this phrase once: take care of your body so the body takes care of your mind, and the mind will take care of your spirit or of your higher purposes.
Absolutely.
So
it will give you the energy and the
will give you
drive
the energy.
for everything in the personal life as well in the world of work, business, startup.
Exactly, correct. Especially in a startup, especially in a new business, you have to show up there always positive, always energized. Because if the way you come into the meetings, it's the way people will mirror the
Absolutely.
same emotions.
Absolutely. So how are you dealing with failures as an entrepreneur or as setbacks? Maybe it's not a failure, but it's not achieving the milestone as quick as you want to.
That's a really good question. It goes into the realm of resilience, right? So one of the things I do when there's a setback, it's self-awareness, right? So just identify that what happened is not definitive, and if an opportunity is closed, there's multiple opportunities that you can open there. That it's not the only thing that you are waiting to happen. So the prospect of, this didn't go the way I wanted. Let's say I didn't close a deal with a customer. Well, you still have dozens or hundreds in the pipeline, right? So you should focus on the positive rather than focusing on the negative.
Again, energy and focus, isn't it?
Energy and focus. Stefan, for the last 25 years, you work with more than 2,000 leaders and more than 100 companies. Tell us, how does effective leadership looks like?
Thank you very much for this question. First of all, let's remind ourselves, leadership is not only coming from the top. It's even difficult if it's just coming from the top. Otherwise, we are still in that old hierarchical thinking from the 1980s or even before. So when you look at leadership, think about the leadership outcomes. And leadership outcomes, and there's some research on there, can be described with kind of three different words, effective leadership outcomes: direction, alignment, and commitment. Direction means that effective leadership is giving the right direction of travel, is able to spell out the purpose, the strategy where the company is traveling to. Alignment is creating that alignment through the different function areas throughout the company. And then commitment is to get the people behind it. So get the motivation of your team to create buy-in, create ownership, create the passion to follow the direction and to proactively work on the alignment. Moreover, what I've learned is leadership, and it's quite obvious, but we've looked at leadership very often and leadership development as a one event. Maybe it's a week of training, or even it's a whole executive MBA program, where you hear a lot, get a lot of input, a lot of kind of new knowledge, and then you close it down in a way. You might have coaching on top, but you're not consistently investing into your leadership development. So leadership development for me, or effective leadership, is being constantly aware of your leadership, be self-reflective, and constantly invest. You've never reached the end of your leadership development journey. It's a journey that kind of keeps on kind of taking you into different territories, into new kind of waters over your whole kind of career span. And Simon Sinek actually compared this with going to the gym. And I think that's a great kind of really picture here. You go into the gym once, you invest into training, you've kind of spent a week on learning about leadership, you have a coach, and then you look into the mirror and you think, my leadership muscles haven't really developed. But if you do it again and over time, and you invest into being reflective, learning about leadership, listening to your team, acting on feedback, you will see a change.
That's really interesting. And I'm interested in the measurement part of it. How do companies measure this alignment that is happening? Do they actually measure it, or how do they measure it? Or what's the typical way in which that's being measured?
Very often it's not done in a systematic way. So what they obviously have, all companies have one sort of like a appraisal system in place. There will be a feedback system sort of spelled out. Unfortunately, very often it's like once a year or maybe twice a year. You have a conversation about your leadership with your line manager. And more and more companies are bringing this more informally into the team, that the leaders are collecting 360 feedback from the team, from peers at same level, but also kind of from their bosses and from other stakeholders.
Which are opinion-based, right?
Which are very much opinion-based.
360 degrees interviews and surveys are like how they feel at the moment and what's the perception at the moment, right?
Exactly. But then there are also surveys, of course, kind of surveys, leadership surveys some companies are using. You've heard about transformational leadership. There's a measurement system out there, the MLQ, which has been used in many, many companies over the last 25 years. But again, it's very often not systematic. You might do it once or twice, and then maybe in the next budget round, it falls off the table because you want to optimize, cut expenditures, stuff like that.
So ideally, this should be continuous.
Should be continuous measurement.
An app like Nanu that could be measuring how that leadership skills are being affected, are being executed in a day-to-day basis and in an automatic way, as opposed to doing it 2 or 3 times per year.
Something like a constant cockpit, like a dashboard you have,
Yes.
where you can get some personal feedback. Of course, data is only telling you so much, but data is kind of starting a conversation with your team, with your peers, with your line manager, and then to further discuss what the data shows.
Correct. Perfect. In your extensive work you have conducted with the global companies, what are the common challenges that you have experienced?
That's a very interesting question. I think a lot of companies are looking to grow leadership capability because to operate in a very complex, fast-changing world, you need to bring responsibility, decision-making more to the local level. So decisions cannot be taken like in a traditional system at the top. So we're talking about distributed leadership, shared leadership, and creating more felt ownership responsibility at every level of the company. So this would include in particular to empower others to do this. So what does it actually mean to be a leader? And to provide more leadership than probably the traditional management. Mm-hmm. So a lot of companies are overmanaged and underled. So how do we bring more leadership capacity into the company at each and every layer of the company? And then another big challenge that I came across is because in complex environments, you often have a very ambitious strategy, very ambitious mission. And how do you translate this in a way to the local level? And the local level could be a division, could be a team, could be a specific country the company is operating in. So how do you do the translation bit? So very often I'm asked to support companies in translating strategy to local level. And that includes a lot about communicating about strategy, storytelling, about the why actually. How do we as a team contribute with what we are doing to the overall strategy mission of the company?
So it's not only the CXOs and the directors and managers, it goes all the way even to individual contributors to have the personal leadership that they can affect with their teams, right?
Absolutely. I've worked with a Swiss investment firm where we've done this with globally 600 leaders. So translating this actually in each section of the company, because if you take an investment company or an investment firm, it looks different for the entity in Singapore than it would look, for example, in Zurich. It's depending on whether you're in wealth management or whatever. So how do we, or if you are actually a business enabler, the traditional kind of services in the company, like IT, like HR, and so on, what is our contribution to strategy? And to do this, to do kind of this discourse, this communication discourse, you need to be able to understand your leadership. You need to be able to learn how to communicate and to facilitate a discussion around the why, actually. Why is it we are existing as a team, and how are we contributing as a team to the strategy of the company? That's a major challenge at the moment.
Right. So what would be your advice for a follow-up question on this meaning and the whys? What would be your advice for leaders to communicate that meaning or to find that meaning? Are all of the leaders aware of their whys?
Not necessarily. So that's a really, really fascinating question. Thank you very much. So I'm citing Simon Sinek here, who said, start with a why. And that has become like a leadership credo for me. So always start with a why, because the why is giving the reason, the meaning, the purpose of why we are doing what we are doing. Very often we are kind of starting with a what. Look, a new initiative, look, a new project, and this is how we do it. So we are tempted to start with the what's and the how's, but we forget to tell our people in our team, our peers, why we are doing what we are doing. So, and that needs from the executive, from the manager, from the leader, a very clear understanding, him or herself. So what's my place with my team under the strategy roof? So because the person becomes a translator. So I need to be clear about the company strategy And then I can start to have this discourse with my team and to say, listen, guys, yeah, so let's discuss what are our contributions. And to find this why, there's a very interesting concept coming from the Japanese culture called ikigai. And ikigai is translated probably into English, the reason for being. So why we're here as a team doing what we're doing, and it's organized around four searching questions. The first one is, what are we really, really passionate about? So what do we get up for in the morning? So what gives us energy? What makes us proud? What do we want to be recognized for? Yeah. The second one is, what are we really good at? And then you're bringing these two kind of two areas together. You create like a Venn diagram. Yeah. So where's the overlap between the passion and our skills?
Right.
Once you found the passions and the skills, you need to contextualize it. The question would be, with our passion and skills, how do we contribute to the company?
Right.
And the reference point, how do we contribute to the company's strategy and mission?
Right.
So the question in the Ikigai would be, what does the world need? So you could translate this into, what does the company need? And then you can add a fourth question to put some value behind it. So you know what you're good at, you know what your skills are, you know your contributions. The fourth one would be, how valuable is this to the company?
Right.
So the question in the Ikigai would be, what would somebody pay me for this? Yeah, of course, you get the salary in the company, but you could make a test and say, how valuable is it to reach, achieve, contribute to strategic priorities in the company, to projects that are A projects, and so on and so forth.
Great advice for leaders, the Ikigai.
The Ikigai is a great advice. Got another one for you. And maybe just kind of to add a little personal story here. I went to a conference in Canada. It was probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. And then you always get the usual questions from the immigration officer. Yeah? Why are you here for? Conference. How long are you here for? 5 days. What kind of conference? And it's a management conference. What's the field you're working in? I said, well, I'm a professor of leadership. And he looked at me and said, so give me a piece of advice, leadership advice. And I told the guy, always be a role model, my friend. And then he stamped my passport and said, welcome to Canada. So I think that's, just joking apart, I think it's this kind of being very clear, because we talked about communication earlier.
Right.
And being a role model is communication. It's non-verbal communication. You communicate by the way your facial impressions are, the smiling, or maybe not, yeah, the way you sit, the way you look.
Eye contact,
the way you listen, yeah, because listening is nonverbal communication, and that is being a role model or leading by example.
Right.
And then, of course, the verbal part comes on top, which is the storytelling. And we heard about the Ikigai earlier. Then with the Ikigai, with these kind of 4 elements, you can create the story for your team. Yeah? And so I think with the Ikigai, for the verbal communication, leading by example, the non-verbal communication, I think this is the key advice I would give. Because you need to remember, as a leader, you're always being kind of observed. You're constantly, wouldn't say under the microscope, but you're on stage. Yeah, and think about yourself. So when you're out to give a pitch, when you're presenting your Nano app, your business idea to someone, they look at you. They look at how passionate is the guy, they try to interpret you, and by that you have an influence. So in the scientific language, we call these two things together, sense-making and sense-giving. So as a leader, you constantly need to find the right sense for your team, for your business, and then the giving is the translation of what you found into your team, into the company, to your stakeholders, whoever you're talking to.
That's a great way of wrapping up our Nanu conversation. Thank you very much, Stefan.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.